Everyone has the same 5 core areas of their life that ultimately determine how happy they'll be. Unfortunately, most of us have developed failure habits in each, and it's Will Moore's mission to help replace those with success habits to maximize momentum. After exiting his business for a combined 9-figure sum, Will learned it's not just about becoming an entrepreneur of your career, but an entrepreneur of the most important business you'll ever run, your life. And to crush it in your life requires firing on all cylinders in your 5 cores by continually taking action, building habits, and maintaining balance in each. Hello, and welcome to the 5 Core Life podcast with Will Moore, founder of More Momentum. If you've not already, please make sure to follow and subscribe to the 5 Core Life podcast so that you get notified when new episodes air every week. So on today's episode of the 5 Core Life, Will Moore is interviewed on the Beyond 8 Figures podcast by Steve Olsher. On the Beyond 8 Figures podcast, Steve Olsher sits down with entrepreneurs that have sold businesses for over $10 million or are running companies that produce $10 million in annual revenue to understand what propelled them and their companies to success. In this episode, Steve Olsher and Will Moore discuss the backlash. It's not about words, it's about actions. A polarized nation struggling for answers. Lessons on scale and looking for an exit. Barriers to entry. If you have a good product, the key is to develop loyal customers through great consistent experience is your best barrier to entry. The 5 core areas of your life. And lastly, roll-up strategy. So are you ready to fire on all cylinders? If so, let's go.
On today's episode of Beyond 8 Figures.
I learned to become a successful entrepreneur in the traditional sense, but really what life's about is becoming a successful entrepreneur of the most important business you're ever going to run, which is your life. And if you're just focusing on the money side and the career side, it's gratifying, but you're chasing a hollow victory because that money alone is not going to make you happy.
Starting, scaling, and exiting a business is hard. So why do some companies achieve 7, 8, and 9-figure exits, while others struggle to reach 6 figures in revenue? To answer these questions, we sit down with top entrepreneurs who have exited for more than $10 million or currently run $10 million plus businesses and grill them until they share their proven tactics and strategies. Welcome to Beyond 8 Figures.
Will Moore, how are you doing, my friend? What's going on?
Hey there, guys. Great. How are you? I apologize. I'd gotten a cancellation message from another show I was going to be on. I thought it was you guys, so sorry for being a little bit late here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no worries. Appreciate you being on. And what we've been talking about, and you can bring some great insight to this as well, is just, it's kind of the damned if you do, damned if you don't type approach in terms of how do you respond from a corporate perspective to what's going on as a corporation. Do you take a stance? Do you take a position? Do you leave well enough alone? Because it's kind of a damned if you do and a damned if you don't.
Right.
And you've got a lot of experience here. And we'll talk about your business acumen and the things that you've done. And you had a pretty substantial exit and so on. But if you were in let's say you were leading a Fortune 500 company right now, what would you advise them to do insofar as speaking to the obvious situation that we're all so well aware of?
So this is actually really, really good question and a really important topic. And, to me, this is kind of where the rubber meets the road with people. I was on an interview yesterday, and we were talking, and we kind of had a similar conversation, not quite the same, but from an individual perspective on what's the stance you take, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it kind of applies, I think, to corporate as well. And what it made me think of is, I don't know, have you seen that Taylor Swift documentary? This is probably going to sound out of left field, but have you seen that?
I can't. I wouldn't be able to look my boys in the face if I said that I had, so no.
Well, Taylor Swift, I'll tell you, as many things are said about her, and we all have our things. I enjoy her music, and my wife does. We actually watched her documentary, and I got to tell you, if you watch that, you'll see somebody with some character, and I was extremely inspired by the way she handled it. So it didn't apply to this exact situation, but it's parallel. She got to a point in her career, in her life, where she was having some serious moral issues with not speaking up about our president and some of the things that were going on. Now, I'm not sitting here trying to get political and get into which side is better, but her particular side was, I do not agree with things that are going on. And as a celebrity that has a voice that can actually make a change and people are going to listen to, and I can make a difference on, she decided, and it was funny, there was this moment in the documentary where all of her advisors were around her, right? And it was like straight out of a movie, but it was legit. And they're basically like, look, do you really want to go down that road? You've got a huge fan base, probably about 50% of them. You may lose, you may risk alienating. And she said, you know what? I can't live with myself and I can't sleep in the morning without speaking up about the way that I feel. Yeah. And so she came out, and I think we all know, well, maybe you don't, but she came out with some pretty powerful statements, and she's continuing to. And I just had a lot of respect for the fact that she said, you know what, this is in my heart and my soul, and this is what's important to me. And if I don't speak my truth, and, I'm going to risk alienating people, like you started this conversation, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But if you keep quiet, to me, that speaks way louder than anything else. And I think that's the point here. And if you don't say anything because you want to play it safe and you don't want to alienate people, to me, that's not my style. That's not how I've ever rolled. And, I know it's kind of the culture and the society we live in. People don't want to alienate, and you see so many people just keeping quiet, not saying things. And to me, I'll be honest, I don't have a ton of respect for that. And I'm not saying, and there's a way to do things, and there's a way to be respectful about your points, and there's a way to get your message across using profanity and getting people's hot buttons raised, but to do it in a respectful, classy, business-like way, and calculated way, to me, regardless of how you speak, I think that people will respect that. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that, and appreciate your perspective on it. And let's take a couple of steps back. And by the way, where you were sitting right now looks very much like we used to have a summer home in Southwest Michigan when we lived in Chicago. And
I'm in Michigan.
Are you? I was going to say that looks like a Michigan inland lake to me, brother. Where are you?
So we are on Central Lake, which is outside of Traverse City. I'm on my first vacation I've taken in quite a long time. I'm with my wife and her family. They've had this small little cottage for years and years, and we've been coming up since I met my wife for the last about 5-6 years. We've been coming up here. Nice. And I got to tell you, I know I hate to do this in a time when I know there's a lot of suffering and a lot of people out there, but this is my truth right now, and I'm not going to hide it. I'm in a beautiful environment right now, and I'm extremely lucky to be here.
Yeah. I miss Southwest Michigan for sure. We're in San Diego now, but it looks spot on. We had a 7.5 acre piece out there with about 300 feet of private beach, and on one of the inland lakes. It was
good eye, man. Yeah, that's pretty impressive from what you're seeing to be able to call that.
So let's and well deserved, obviously, man. You've worked hard to get to where you are, and I want to take a step back. The $321 million exit. So that was, just to be clear, that was Doorstep delivery, because you've done other things, but that was Doorstep, correct?
Yes. So Doorstep delivery was right. That's been my most financially successful business. And yeah, we merged with a company called Bite Squad back in around 2006 probably. And then, we just exited this past year for the 321. We realized at a certain point that we couldn't compete with the Grubhubs and the Uber Eats and these companies that had billions of dollars. And, we started with nothing. We bootstrapped it, me and my partners. We said, you know what, seems like a good idea. At the time I was selling real estate, which is another business I had. And I was working for another company at the time, and I saw that we were trapped in an office with no food other than pizza and Chinese. And this was back right before another historical time in our country when we had that real estate boom. And it was right on that precedence, like 2005 and 6 and 7, right before the crash. And our phones are ringing off the hook. We were selling land way out in the middle of nowhere, Ocala, Florida, and these places, thousands of acres. And we literally could not leave. And I was like, there's got to be something better than pizza and Chinese. And there wasn't. And so we started this company. We had zero competition for about 8 years. And then all of a sudden, they started coming out of the woodwork, the Uber Eats and the Grubhubs, with billions of dollars in funding and, determined to lose money in order to gain market share. And we knew we couldn't compete with that. So we partnered up with another company similar size. We raised money. We started gulping up smaller companies that were in those tier 2, tier 3 cities that the big guys hadn't gotten to yet. So not the New Yorks, the LAs, the Chicagos, but the Nashvilles, the Orlandos, the these smaller towns, and that's where we dominated, and we were able to get enough of a foothold to exit. So it was fortunate.
Gotcha. So for those of you who have listened to the show before, and you know that the question that we usually come out of the gate with is, how do you meet the criteria for being on Beyond 8 Figures? And Will, you may not be familiar with this, but on our show, we exclusively sit down with entrepreneurs who have either exited for more than $10 million or currently run businesses that gross more than $10 million annually. And so for those of you who are wondering, that is how Will meets the criteria. So I want to take a couple of steps back first, and then move forward into as much of the details around the exit, the event as we can here. So you started out with the idea. So just take us back through the embryonic stages and the starting scale here. So it was just you and a buddy, and you guys just had this idea, or just take us back through the origin story.
So it was literally probably 2000. Let's see. I think we crashed 2007-ish, late 2007. So it was it was literally probably 3 or 4 months before that. And I saw the writing on the wall, and that I told you, we're selling these parcels, and I won't get into a long story about it, because it could be a whole show. It was a truly amazing situation, what we did. The short of it is, have you ever seen that movie Far and Away with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise?
I don't think I've seen that. Have you seen that, Rich? I haven't seen that. Yeah.
There's a scene at the end of the movie where there's this land rush. It was set back in the 1800s. So I'm not sure if you're familiar, but basically the United States at some point, they were trying to get everybody out west. Everybody was migrating into Staten Island, and they were trying to get people out west. So our country literally gave land away. And the way they would do it is they'd have these big land rushes, and they would have everybody lined up in a row, and they would put these parcels out, and they'd put stakes in the ground, and then they would basically fire a gun and say, go. And whoever got to that parcel first, it was a race, and put their stake and grab that stake, that was theirs. And that's literally how we expanded into the West. And our company was kind of similar. So we would buy these thousands of acres of land, and we would subdivide it into these parcels, 5, 10, 20, sometimes 100-acre parcels. But instead of horses, we had SUVs, and we would line up in a row. And on the walkie-talkie, our boss would say, okay, go. And we would just take off, and whoever had we had parcel stickers that said lot 1, lot 2, and whoever basically put their sticker on that parcel is the one that got that piece of land. And they weren't free. We had to come back, and we had a banker at the tent, and they would sign the papers and the documents and whatnot. So it was a really insane job. Like, you couldn't script it more. When I was interviewing for it, and my friends told me what it was, I said, that can't be real. But it was. And but that was what I was telling you earlier. So then we were stuck in this office, and I remember sitting out in Lake Eola. I was in Orlando at the time. Lake Eola is this famous, our main lake right in the middle of the city. And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we're staring up at these brand new condos going up. I mean, there was probably 20 of them, because this is during the boom when everything was going up and things were just expanding like crazy. And I remember thinking, what do all these people need? What kind of business can I make? Because this real estate thing ain't going to last forever. It's getting too frothy. And it just hit me. Food delivery. People need to eat. And I'm a healthy guy. And here I was stuck in the office. All I could eat was pizza and Chinese. And I was like, I want sushi. I want Thai. I want salads. I want all these awesome things. And the fact that I couldn't get them, I said, I want to figure out a way to do it. So I grabbed my best friend that worked with me at the time, and we said, okay. I said, hey, are you interested? At first he said no. He said, I don't think there's enough money in it. And he came around after about 2-3 weeks, and we both quit our job at Florida Land Partners, which was literally like a month before the crash, started this company, and just never looked back.
Yeah, Rich, let me give you an opportunity to jump in here, because I know you always have a ton of questions, and I tend to hog. So let me give you over to Rich.
It's all good. A quick comment on the real estate stuff first. So it's brilliant though, because it was a form of gamification, right? Like they still had to buy the land, but it was, hey, you get to rush out as fast as you can and find the piece that's got the view you like. And
oh yeah, you better believe it. Hope of gain, fear of loss, my man.
Yeah,
the people that ran that company knew exactly what they were doing. So we would be sold out in less than 5 minutes. I'm talking about hundreds of parcels sold out. and this was the first time slot. So we'd have a 9 o'clock time slot, a 12 o'clock, a 2 o'clock, and a 4 o'clock. So you had people driving hours and hours to get there. And if we got sold out at that 9 o'clock from that first group of people, and it was a lottery, by the way, what time slot you got, right? So people would sign up for appointments, and then it would be a lottery in terms of whether you get the 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And the fact that we sold out that quickly, you better believe those people that were at the 12 o'clock and the 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock at the next sale we had, we're bright and early signing up and making sure that they were, had the best chance of getting those early time slots. So you're absolutely right. It was a gamification, and it was at the time everybody won, because we actually had people that would buy their parcels at 9 a.m., turn them and flip them around to the 12 o'clock people for 100, 200 grand profit. It was just absolutely insane.
So one of the things that's really unique about that, but it's happening all the time, is the story that you tell prior. So here was the real estate market just flying high, right? And 5 years prior, or maybe not even 5 years prior, people couldn't qualify for an RV, or for a SUV, and now they're buying houses, right? Because we had like no docs, no interest, stated income.
You got it.
Right? Like it's like in hindsight, it's obvious it's a recipe for disaster. But the story that was being told, and kind of like when things are going on in the world, we always hear buy low, sell high, but sometimes people don't, the fear of loss is almost more important. So I want to take the lessons learned from that into, here you are, you saw the writing on the wall, maybe not exactly how it was going to unfold, but you knew it wasn't going to last. And so you quit, you started this new thing. But a lot of people don't realize how challenging, even though it sounds simple, what you were going to do, it's very challenging because it's a two-sided marketplace. You have to get all the restaurants to agree to do it, and you have to get the people to agree that they want someone else to go pick up their food that's not even part of the the restaurant, to touch their food in between. Like, again, in hindsight, when we're going through what we're going through, seems like a no-brainer. But what was the story you told in the beginning? And then what was the thing that got you momentum the fastest? Did you pick a certain kind of restaurant, or how did you get both sides to believe in what you were doing?
That's a really great question. And I want to touch briefly on what you started this with, which was, these people were, well, I won't divert. I'll go right into that. So it was a huge challenge. Right now, everybody's familiar with food delivery, right? And now it's just a matter of what company you're going to pick. Which one you're going to choose. Who's sending you that $20 coupon in the mail, and you're like, okay, I'm going to use these guys this week. Nobody. It was completely novel, and it was a huge hill to overcome to not only get the restaurants to agree, because all of a sudden, all right, imagine you're a restaurant, right? You're walking in, and their food's like, you think about it as their baby. It's like that's their baby, and you're basically saying, hey, do you mind if I just kind of take your baby out and do my thing with it? Trust me, it's totally cool. I know what I'm doing. It was like we got 99% no's from the restaurants when we first started doing it. It was extremely difficult to convince a restaurant. But the model that we used, which truly ended up being the secret to our success, I think, was this essentially win-win scenario where when we really broke it down, they couldn't really argue, which was essentially, hey, listen, you guys have your food cost, your overhead, and your labor, right? And so when we bring you an order, your labor and your overhead, those don't change, right? Like your staff and all these, you've still got to have those people in the office, in the restaurant, your cooks, your waiters, your to-go staff, whether we're there or not, bringing you an order. Your overhead, your utilities, your rent, all these things, they're fixed costs, whether we bring you an order or not. The only thing that's changing when we bring you an order is you do have to pay that food cost, right? So that's typically around 25 to 30% per restaurant. So our commission was around 30%. And so when you initially tell a restaurant, hey, our commission's 30%, their head pops off. They're like, 30%? My margins, I only make, 20% on every order. And you say, okay, hold on. But you're already paying. This is an incremental sale because you're already paying, your overhead, your utilities, your rent, your staff. It's just your food costs at 30%. So if we come in and we bring you an order and it's a 30% discount, that still leaves a 40% profit margin, right? Because it's our discount plus the 30% food costs, and then it's that 40%. They say, well, I got my, I still got to pay my staff and stuff. You're like, yeah, but you're already doing that. And unless we're bringing you so much business that you have to hire extra people, which would actually still be a good thing because you'd still be making money, we're only bringing you incremental sales. And that's how we did it. And that's what we were able to convince them on. And ultimately, it's the momentum. I think one of you guys mentioned that's my whole thing, more momentum. That's what I'm all about now. And it's amazing when you do start to get momentum, how things start to shift. And we would get a couple of big restaurants on board, right? At first it was Chili's. Chili's was our big whale. We got Chili's on board, and that's when things changed. It was like, okay, we got a national restaurant on board that's doing it. And then everybody else was like, oh, okay, well, if they're doing it, maybe we should try it. And then everybody's doing it. And then you don't want to be the one to get left out. That's when it gets fun. When the restaurants are blowing up your phone saying, hey, my neighbor over here is doing $2,000-$3,000 a day in business from you guys. Can I sign up? So that was on the restaurant side. And then, the customer side, it was definitely, fortunately there was, like I said, there's pizza and Chinese. So it's not like people had never ordered before, but I think it was definitely difficult at first for people to be like, wait, I can get sushi? How do I know it's going to be fresh? How do I know? And we had these double thick thermal insulated bags, and we had precautions in place to make sure that the food went straight from the restaurant to the customer. They opened it up in front of the customer. And because we were able to do that consistently and deliver a solid experience, and don't get me wrong, they weren't all perfect. It's impossible to do that. But enough of a solid experience, consistent experience, I think people started, that's when you get word of mouth going. You say, hey, I ordered sushi from Bento the other day and it was fantastic. And then the neighbor goes, really? And then that's how things start to take off.
Yeah. So talk about scale. So first of all, you bootstrapped this thing. So it was you and it was one other partner. So it was you and one partner.
It was me and my best friend that I was working with at Florida Land Partners. And we actually ended up, rather than try to reinvent the wheel, we went and looked to see, is anybody else doing this around? And there was a guy that was doing it out of Gainesville, Florida. It was called gatorfood.com. And we ended up finding him, talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I'm doing this. And we're like, do you guys want to try to potentially do something together? And at first he just sold us kind of the formula of, this is kind of the idea of how you go into the restaurant and partner with them. And we kind of took it to the next level, and he saw very quickly, because he actually licensed his software to us too. When people would order online, and then our dispatcher would see it, and then they would send it to the driver, and then the driver would go pick it up and deliver it. And it was crappy software, but it was all it was, the only game in town at the time. And he saw our back end, he saw how well we started doing, and he said, hey, you guys are killing it. What are you doing? And we said, well, we tweaked this and we did this, and then we partnered with him. And then that's when we started opening up corporate locations and franchises.
So there was three of you then at that point, and you guys are all third.
It was him. He had a partner, so it was him and his partner. So technically, it ended up being four of us were RDD, which was Restaurant Delivery Developers. Got it. And so just so we're clear in terms of the ownership structure, so are you guys all equal partners at this point? Are you all a quarter owner? Yeah, we were all quarter owners. That's exactly right. Got it. So did you bring in any outside capital then to scale, or was it just simply through collective efforts and bringing in people as needed, and that allowed you to scale? How did that happen? Yeah, no. So until we partnered with Bite Squad out of Minneapolis, is when we raised money when those competitors started coming in. But before that, no, we bootstrapped it 100%. The way we started doing it and being able to afford it, or to expand, was we would actually get an owner operator to buy. We were doing these franchises. So we did franchises where there would be the initial $50,000 to $65,000 franchise fee, or depending on the area, it varied. Then we were getting our licensing fees, right? So that influx of capital is what allowed us to continue to expand. And then we would use that capital a lot of times to open up our own corporate branch. So in several of our branches, we found some of the some of our superstar managers in our branches that were like, hey, I'd like to go start my own branch up. And we would literally, so that's like Jacksonville was our first big one. So we actually set up Jacksonville with our GM from our Gainesville location. who said, yeah, I'll move out to Jacksonville and do it. And he'd already knew all the ropes and knew everything. So we funded it essentially, stuck him out there, gave him a salary, and that's how we grew Jacksonville. And so that's kind of how we slowly, incrementally grew our amount of locations.
Yeah. At the peak, what were you doing revenue wise?
So we got up to approximately 23 million, I think, is where we were.
Was that with Byte or before Byte?
No, that was before. Byte,
okay.
With Byte, we got to over 100 million, 100, maybe 150 when we sold. And then that's when we partnered with, or we got bought by a company called Waiter Holdings out of Louisiana. And they were about $150 million company, 150. So they were equal. So we kind of just kept springboarding, right? So we were about a $25 million company. And then we partnered with Byte Squad, who was about the same. So then all of a sudden we're 50, but then we started growing. We used money. We raised funds and we grew and we started buying companies. And so then we got up to this 150 or so. And then we partnered with them, doubled. So then we became this, $300 million company.
Yeah. And at every juncture, you're being diluted, I would think, time after time after time, albeit it's a relative dilution in terms of having ownership as it relates to the total value and valuation of the whole that you're moving into, and based on what you're able to do insofar as bringing in the outside capital and then reinvesting and growing and so on and so forth. So by the time you hit the final tranche there, where were you at from an ownership position in terms of percentage?
So I was probably at around, I think we were each around 5-6%. So
Okay.
that still puts me as a candidate for your show, I believe, right?
But the whole entity, I mean, you were obviously involved in the whole entity and growing it. So, I mean, for sure you are.
Yeah.
So to that end, was there an actual liquidation event? The $320 million odd exit, did somebody come in and then buy that whole piece, or did they take pieces of it, or what was?
Yeah. So Waiter
happened
Holdings bought.
Yeah.
So yeah, Waiter Holdings bought Byte Squad, which was our combined company, which was Doorstep and Byte Squad. We combined, and then we started growing it and adding locations. They bought us for 321.
Gotcha.
So
was that an all stock deal?
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say
go
we
ahead.
got half
You're
cash, and then we got half stock. And so Byte Squad, Waiter Holdings is actually a publicly traded company.
Yeah, and you still hold ownership in that, or did you divest?
Yeah, I still have. I actually have not sold. I actually bought more. So we had a 6-month holding period, and there was a pretty painful period there for a minute because it was just kind of bad timing. The restaurant industry, the RDS, restaurant delivery service industry, started getting a bad reputation. Grubhub's stock started falling dramatically, and Uber came out, and everybody they were losing money hand over fist. Ironically, so we were making money.
Yeah.
Doorstep delivery was a profitable business, as was Byte Squad. Well, towards the end they weren't, because they were spending so much money to grow, but they weren't losing a ton. They were losing very little. Waiter, on the other hand, was definitely losing more, and it's no secret. You can look it up, public records. It was a bit mismanaged in the beginning, so it was a painful period. I had a 6-month hold on my stock, and I had to just watch this thing go from $10 down to a very low number. Fortunately, it's on its way back up now. They've gotten new people in place, and there's a new CEO, and now they actually just the other day hired an advisor from Delivery Hero, which is one of the largest restaurant delivery services in Europe. So they're making the right moves now. But for a period, it got a little ugly. So I did get my cash. So they couldn't take that away from me, but it was not fun to watch our stock price dip as much as it did.
Yeah. I mean, interesting. It was peaking around 12.50, something like that, and then it dropped down below $1, and now it's sitting around $2 or something like that. And you still have holdings in it, yeah?
Yeah.
And you're buying more.
It got down to like 20 some cents. I mean, that wasn't fun. Yeah.
Wow.
And we actually, and that was when it was just like a carnage of bad news in the industry overall. It was being priced as a bankrupt company. So basically, because Grubhub was doing so bad, and then when when our company was merged with Waiter and they didn't do it in the most efficient way possible, their first couple quarters of earnings were absolutely abysmal because they, you know, they're paying all these costs to, you know, there's obviously acquisition costs in these things. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get whacked. And that's basically, you know, not to talk down the company, because I think they've done a good job of turning things around and at least recognizing that they were doing wasn't working. But we actually switched we were one of the few companies still left in the country that had a W-2 model. And they finally broke down and they switched to an independent contractor model. And since they made that decision, this last earnings was a good one. And that's when the stock started to pop. And my personal prediction is that, you know, we're definitely not going bankrupt. And I think that we'll be acquired. I mean, I'm sure you've heard Uber's now talking about acquiring Grubhub, and I think it's only a matter of time before our company gets acquired as well.
Yeah, there are people asking what the ticker signal is. It's trading for $2.10 right now. This is not stock advice. We are not suggesting that you do anything, but the yes, but the ticker.
I've got a lot in it, and I'm holding mine. That's all I'll say. I'm not right.
The ticker symbol is WTRH, and if you look at the 5-year trend on it, you know, I mean, it looks like there's some upside, but again, we are not in the business of giving stock advice. We can only give you, you know, a little bit of the story here. And Will is a shareholder, so he has to fully disclose that, which he did. And there you go. Now we're done with the FTC and all that fun stuff. All right. So Richie, let me kick it over to you before we give Will a chance to wrap up with some of the things that he's doing now, because there's a lot of really great work that is very near and dear to your heart, Rich. That Will is doing now. But Rich, another question for Will as far as the business and the scale and all that fun stuff and the exit, anything around there that you want to ask?
Yeah, again, I'm sorry we didn't get to talk to you longer because I could go deep on a few of those things, but it seems like you have a pretty good intuition. I don't know if or great timing by being able to get out of that too, but still participate while holding some stock there, because to me, a lot of what's going on right now with meal delivery and just Uber and Lyft and just other things too, the way the model has changed where there's just big money that'll just throw money to gain audience, because everyone knows you need to have attention first before you can sell somebody something. So what's interesting though, kind of go back to Groupon, Groupon was a glorified mailing list, and they had the ability at one point to sell for like $6 billion, but no one really looked at it like this is a bunch of deal seekers, and so no one's loyal to Groupon or excuse me, Grubhub or Groupon. Even they'll take Living Social and all these different, they're really just deal seekers. You said it in the very beginning, who's going to give me my next $20 coupon? That's what's been the problem from meal delivery and all this stuff. So what do you see is for someone who comes up with a good idea and they're ahead of time on the markets? So because you were definitely ahead of time, right? There was no Grubhub yet.
Right. We didn't have competition.
So when you're doing the sweat and tears and blood to get it going, do you see anything that you could have done different in hindsight to maybe communicate with those companies, like to almost up the value, things like you learned from the real estate, we're gamifying it, because they're just trying to acquire customers. The quick, like Uber in the very beginning, I can't remember the exact number. It was costing $200+ to get a new rider. Mm-hmm. And then they found out, oh, wow, look, we can gamify this. We're going to give somebody $20 if they get their friend. And then they thought they were gaming Uber. We'll take my ride for free down to the stadium, and then I'll give you your ride. And everyone thought they gamed Uber, but Uber just gamed them. It only cost them $40 to get 2 new customers. So what were some lessons you learned if someone they feel like they're ahead of the game, the way they could position themselves when they know the industry is going to get bigger, but they just don't really know how long it's going to take?
So are you talking about the customers, or are you talking
just
about
someone who's starting a business, right? Because some people right now, we don't have our banner with us, but it's start, scale, exit. Yes. And so someone who's thinking of starting one right now, learning lessons from what you learned on how to scale something and potentially getting to an exit. So an actual business owner, when we're in all this disruption right now, they're thinking of some new idea. They know they're ahead of time, but they know someone will come in the future. What were some lessons you learned on how you would structure your business?
So you're talking about barriers to entry,
yeah,
essentially. So right, how to keep the competitors. Well, the short answer is if you have a good product, there's no fail-safe solution other than So let me go into what you were saying at the very beginning. Nowadays, I think that if you have not been using a company for a while, one of these companies, and we moved to Chicago recently. I'm from Florida, but then when I sold my business, my wife got into Northwestern for physical therapy. We just had a kid. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, would I be living in Chicago? I would have said, you're out of your freaking mind. Here I am sitting in front of Lake Michigan. But the key really is, we were able to develop those loyal customers. And even though those big players came in, our biggest markets at the time when we merged with Bite Squad were Orlando, which was my home market, was our biggest. Nashville. Let's see. I guess it would have been Gainesville. Actually, was still one in Tallahassee, Tampa. So I will say that even though those companies were coming in and they were throwing those big coupons out, we weren't losing a ton of market share. And I think the reason for that is when you deliver a really great, consistent experience to people, it's like what I'm doing right now with More Momentum. I'm trying to teach people about habits and how your whole life is about habits, and it's getting rid of the bad ones and starting and replacing the good ones. And that's kind of what happens with any product you use. And so if there's no reason to switch, you may get a coupon and you may go use that other service because it's $20. But if you're in the habit of using Doorstep delivery and they've provided really good service, especially if when you use that coupon, the guy shows up and he doesn't have a bag, which none of these companies these days use. It's crazy to me. None of them use these double thick thermal insulated bags. And it's a lot less of a, ours, like I said, our people had to wear uniforms and they had these bags. It was and they had car toppers. It was a much more, I don't want to use the word professional operation, but from a customer's perspective, it certainly felt a lot more like these guys are investing a lot more time versus just, this is just an Uber driver who was taking a passenger somewhere. And now he just stopped at a restaurant and picked my bag up. And I do think that goes a long way in any industry that you're in. If you can provide that consistent, great experience to a customer, it's gonna be your best barrier of entry for other companies coming. And so, but what I saw, like you said, is at a certain point, I mean, when you've got, and at this time Amazon was doing it, right? So literally within 3 months, we had Uber Eats, Grubhub, DoorDash, and Amazon Prime delivery. We were doing food delivery, all open up in some of our larger markets, which again, these aren't tier 1 markets, but Orlando, Nashville. At some point you see the writing on the wall when you're not spending billions and, like you said, $200 to get each customer. And we said, look, we're not going to long-term be able to compete with this. And we did. I got to tell you, we held our own for as long as we needed to through the transition. It wasn't like they all opened up and boom, our business dropped 80%, right? And because we were able to hold on for as long as we did, you got to think about the fact that we did a merger with Bite Squad. We then had to continue to grow and show that we were growing or at least sustaining in our markets for the next 3 to 4 years before we got bought by Waiter Holdings. So, and I think the reason we were able to do that, and some of our markets didn't do quite as well. The ones that were newer, that didn't have that loyal customer base that we had started, they dropped off a lot quicker. Like Denver, we opened up only about a year before the deal, and it flew by the wayside. We ended up closing Denver. We just didn't have enough time to build that stronghold. But the markets where it was like everybody talked about, like, who do you order from? Oh, Doorstep delivery. Who else? We were able to do okay.
Yeah. Well, congrats on all the success there, and now obviously you get to enjoy the beautiful shores of and we lost Will there with his video. Hopefully he'll come back, but now you get to enjoy the inland shores of an inland lake in Michigan there. So congrats on all that fun stuff. And having lived in Chicago for 44 years, You'll enjoy the city, and the winters are questionable. So there you have it. But
Tell me about it, brother.
Yeah, man. So the work that you're doing now, and we're not going to have a whole heck of a lot of time to dive into this, but obviously, you had the exit. You're a little bit older now. You figured out what's most important to you. You created this whole all the work that you're doing around your core score and just everything as it relates to the the 5 areas of your life and getting those in check, your mindset, career and finance, relationships, physical health, emotional health, and give back, all very, very important pieces of the puzzle here for a successful life. Not a lot of time to dig into it, but can you talk briefly about those 5 core areas of your life and how you're applying those teachings to your life now?
So what I discovered when I sold my business, for about 10 minutes when it hit me, and it was like, this is what I've spent the last 10 years of my life working for this check that just got wired into my bank account, and this feeling. And I'm not going to lie, it was a great freaking feeling. But for all of about 10 minutes, and then it was like, okay, now what? And fortunately, I've become this insatiable self-help book reader since college. I actually had this rock bottom bounce, which I don't have time to get into, but that's what helped me to start recreating myself in this journey. That ironically, it was learning about these different areas of life that I eventually ended up putting together and realizing we all share these same 5 core areas of our life. And the way that I look at it is, I learned to become a successful entrepreneur in the traditional sense, but really what life's about is becoming a successful entrepreneur of the most important business you're ever going to run, which is your life. And if you're just focusing on the money side and the career side, it's gratifying, but you're chasing a hollow victory, because that money alone is not going to make you happy. But yes, you want to. And so career and finances is one of my cores, but it's not just about make an S ton of money. It's make sure you're doing something you really enjoy. When you wake up, it's using your strengths, your passions, you've got goals, you've got a purpose, and you're like, yes, this is something, and that's what keeps you moving, because life is about movement and growth. And if you're not growing, you're dying. But then you've got to also pay attention and balance these other areas, because if you're not balancing with your mindset and your relationships and your physical health and your emotional health, and you're not giving back to the world, if you're not leaving the world a better place than when you were in it, than when you came into it, you're going to be wanting. And I don't care how much money, and you guys have heard it a million times, and it's the truth, and people say, oh, that's BS. If I had all this money, there's no way I'd be unhappy. Trust me, from somebody that's been at the very extreme of both ends, that it is not the secret to happiness. It definitely is a piece to happiness, and that it's nice to not having to worry about where your next meal is coming from and these things, and being able to, live a nice, comfortable lifestyle, make sure your family's taken care of. But you gotta balance these other areas. You gotta balance your relationships. If you're spending all your time in the office working, and you're not working out with your physical health, you're not eating right, you're gonna feel like crap. And if you're not, spending the time with the people you love and proactively trying to build these relationships, building allies, if you're one of these standoffish people that doesn't look people in the eye, and maybe you're short-term getting ahead in business, eventually it's going to come back to bite you. You got to build allies in life. You got to build strong partnerships and relationships. And even like with your significant other, like, are you butting heads, and are you letting your ego constantly get in the way? Even if you're making $1 zillion, you're not going to be happy if you're not in a good relationship. I don't know if either of you guys are married, but so we know what I'm talking about. Right.
To each other.
Happy wife, happy life, right? I mean, if you're not if you're not on the same page with your spouse, and all these things take work, and they all take discipline. And that's what I mentioned at the start of the show, and I'll end it here because I know we're out of time. It's about shining a spotlight on your life and saying, what are the failure habits I've developed in each one of these core areas, and what do I need to replace them with? What are the success habits? And these are ones that are based on, to me, universal principles. Like I said, I've read a ton of books, and at the end of the day, life is complex, principles aren't. And there's principles that have been around since the beginning of time, and that'll be around till the end. And if you base your life on the things that that have been proven to make you happy, and you just get the discipline to make sure that you continue to follow through until it becomes part of you, and these become habits and success habits, and you're building more positive and negative momentum, then you will be happy and live your best life.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if you find yourself with some extra time there on the shore, check out my book, "What Is Your What," which is definitely along the lines of the type of reading I think you would enjoy. So we'll hopefully chat
Nice.
more. And we're going to let you jump here and enjoy the sunshine. Let me give you the opportunity to share where folks can get more information about you, or what would you like them to do? What's the best next step?
So you mentioned your core score. So these 5 core areas I'm talking about, there's a really simple, quick way to kind of get a very quick sense of where you stand in each of these core areas. Like I said, it's about shining a spotlight. And if you want to know where you stand, at my website, www.mooremomentum, that's MOORE, like my last name, William Moore, mooremomentum.com. There's just a simple tab at the top that said, "What's your core score?" There's a little quiz you can take, and it'll sort of at least give you that 10,000 foot view of where you stand in each of your cores. And you don't want to try to fix everything right away, right? As humans, that's our tendency. We want to just all of a sudden, I want to be firing on all cylinders and killing it all. No, you got to start with one core, start with the one that you're weakest on, whether it's your physical health, your relationships, your career, finance. Start taking those actions immediately, and just 1 or 2 at a time, say, this is what I know I need to do to improve it. And then just start building it and to have the discipline to follow through. And I have a system that I help people to develop that. And I'm going to have this app that's coming out in the next 6 to 7 months, which will be really exciting, which is a game. Your partner mentioned gamification. I'm gamifying the whole experience. You're going to be a rocket ship, and you've got your 5 cores as the cylinders of your engine. And the idea is you're continually building momentum. You're building fire and thrust every day, and you're balanced. And the more you balance, the faster and further and stronger you get. You go to different planets, different galaxies. You're leveling up your ship. You're meeting different aliens. And the whole point of it is, as you level up on screen, you're also leveling up in real life. And so it's going to be neat.
Awesome. All right, Will Moore, we're going to let you jump, and Richie and I will finish up here, man. But again, enjoy the shores there of the inland lakes of Michigan. And man. Again, congrats on all your success. Talk to you really soon. Definitely check out everything that Will is up to, and you can get more information there on Will as I mute him out with those beautiful, lovely, lovely breezes of the shores of Lake Michigan there, or the inland part of Lake Michigan. Anyway, but we're going to mute Will out, and we'll just finish up here. So let me just simply say this, which is, again, check out mooremomentum.com, MOORE momentum.com, and given all the stuff that you do with happiness and whatnot, Rich, it seemed like a pretty apropos way to end that conversation. What was your take around that?
Oh, I love it. He's got 5 core, I got 9, but the 5 are within my 9 that he was talking about. But it always reminds me, though, when we're talking about money and can't buy happiness, I think part of the problem when it comes to money, unlike the other ones, is it rents it so well that it's easy for people to think that that's the thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, hopefully we rented a little bit of happiness for you guys here today, and hopefully we gave you the opportunity to get an inside look at someone who, and this is one of the strategies that you can look at from a business perspective, which is a roll-up strategy. And so it's 1 + 1 = 11, right? I mean, you look at how they went from what they were doing to finding the partners in Gainesville, to finding the partners in Byte, and then into finding the partners, ultimately to acquire the company with Waiter Holdings and so on. So as a roll up, as a consortium of companies at $100 million in revenue, it became much more appealing from an acquisition standpoint than a company that was doing 15 or 20 million. Not that there couldn't have been an exit at that level, but sometimes, it just begs the question, is a smaller piece of a larger pie better for you in the long run as an entrepreneur? And for some people, the answer is no. But oftentimes, especially if exiting is on your docket there, on your agenda, part of your goals, your objectives for your business, then that might actually be something that is worth exploring. And this was one of the first examples that we've had of someone on talking about a roll-up strategy in terms of partnering and then partnering and being acquired. So there's no set way to get to the finish line. Ultimately, the finish line is going to be different for all of us. But in this case, that was a perfect example of how you can get to the finish line simply by partnering with others. And I really like that approach. So, Richie, why don't you take us out, and we will talk to you guys next time here on Beyond 8 Figures. Take care, everybody.
That's it for today's episode of the 5 Core Life podcast with Will Moore, founder of More Momentum. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you have not already, please make sure to subscribe and follow the 5 Core Life podcast wherever you are listening or watching this so that you get notified when new episodes air every week. And if you have not joined the 5 Core Life Facebook group, I encourage you to join that and see what all of the fuss is about. There's some awesome content designed to get your momentum going, including a monthly giveaway to win a complimentary coaching call with the Will Moore. The Facebook group is currently the only place to get Will's dedicated attention on your 5 core journey. If you're feeling stuck or just want someone to cheer you on, then that is the place you need to be. There's nothing like a community of people on the same journey to get you fired up, kicking butt, and taking names. So come join us.
Well, get moving. Gain momentum. Join the movement. Join Emmett by going to moremomentum.com to take a free life evaluator quiz on where you currently stand in each of your 5 cores.